This is Nick Millavoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarist podcast, where each week we are talking about one of the 100 guitar players we think you should know about. Today, we're talking about Allan Holdsworth.
And it seemed like in the last 3 hours, I feel like we've discovered more about Allan Holdsworth. To the point where we're like, we need a month to go over all this newly found info.
Yeah, it's one of those tip of the iceberg things. We kind of, once we got past that, like I've felt like I've known a lot about Allan Holdsworth for a long time, but once we really started digging in and prepping, I thought I was ready to go 3 hours ago, but I don't know. We're probably going to miss a lot of stuff because there's just a whole world of information, and oh boy, we got a lot to talk about. Okay, before we do, we want to remind you that you can get at us. Send us a message. Tell us about some amazing Allan Holdsworth album that we don't know about. Or whatever you want to tell us about. 100guitarists at premierguitar.com. The voicemail line, which also receives texts. We love voicemails. Is 319-423-9734. We got a couple calls today that we're going to play on the show. We always love that. And wherever you're listening, which you can find us wherever you find podcasts, or if you're watching on the Premier Guitar YouTube channel, be sure, give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a rate. We could use some ratings, some reviews, any of that stuff, whatever you got. People write in a lot and tell us they've been listening to all the episodes of the podcast. We tell the world. Give us a
That's
review.
right. All right, and today we are sponsored by Voodoo Lab. Voodoo Lab has been designing and manufacturing professional electronics for recording and tourist artists since 1986. They are a pioneer and leader in pedal board power. How many of us have the pedal power? I mean, I bought that the same day I bought my first pedal board. Exactly. Voodoo Lab Pedal Power was introduced as the first commercially available isolated power supply for guitar effects in 1996 and remains the industry standard today. I cannot stress, especially now with all these crazy high voltage milliamp sucking pedals, how important power is to your setup, no matter what you do.
That's right. And Voodoo Lab offers unmatched performance that pros trust the most. Even under the worst AC line conditions, pedals sound and perform best with pedal power. Every Voodoo Lab product is handmade in the USA, built one at a time in Northern California with the finest materials for rugged reliability. You want to find the best pedal power for your board, head on over to voodoolab.com. Check out everything they offer. And, just look through artists we cover at Premier Guitar, and you'll see a lot of Voodoo Lab.
And I'm going to do a special shout out to their Giggity pedal. I reviewed that way back in the day. It's a cool little analog overdrive preamp thing, purple and black. Super awesome pedal.
Right on.
Go check out the Giggity. All right. So Allan Holdsworth. I feel like we start every one of these episodes like, where do you begin with somebody like Allan Holdsworth? But I feel like a good place to begin is how much Allan's sound had changed. His sound had changed so much over the years that I didn't even realize until you sent me a track.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's not Allan Holdsworth. That can't be
Right.
him. Because when I think of Allan Holdsworth, I think of this very legato, very processed, very smooth sound that's also very intervallic and knows no limits on the upper end of his technical ability. You know what I mean? And you sent me a track, I believe it was from a Soft Machine record.
Bundles. Yeah.
Was the name of the track, right?
Is the name of the album, yeah.
Name of the album. It sounded like some dude ripping and jamming on classic rock. I mean, and part of it was
I might push back a little bit and say that that's a little reductive, but go on.
But I mean, like, at the very least in tone, it was like straight up. It was not the tone that I knew of as Allan Holdsworth. I would not be able to recognize that.
That's right. There is, and that's something to talk about. There is a big transition when you're going through his discography in the type of sound he used. And I think that it really just has to do with available technology. So it's like You hear bundles. There's other recordings that, there's a bunch of stuff where he's using a really distorted tone. This stuff with Tony Williams' Lifetime. The early stuff he played, there's that prog band Tempest. He's using a really nasty, like distorted rock guitar sound. And, that at that time, that was the only way effectively. And I've read interviews where he talked about this, and like he was using that tone because that was how you could be the most legato. Like how you could get enough sustain and compression and all that stuff that he needed for the technique that he was going for, which is pretty wild to think about. Like he kind of had this singular vision of like getting all these notes in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like when you listen through in order, like you do a historic listen, it's like that 70s stuff is so dirty and so nasty. And then when the technology comes along to do like a really clean legato, that's where we think of the sound.
Yeah.
That's the sound we think of Allan Holdsworth as having.
And also like the Synthaxe stuff that he started in the 80s.
So we got to talk about that. We're going
to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I feel like, to me, most people, when they think of Allan Holdsworth, they think of the later period sound. And one of the few guys ever to make a headless guitar cool.
Sure.
What a ringing endorsement that was.
I mean, no. I'm glad that Allan Holdsworth found the headless guitar. Listen. People are gonna. I don't want to upset anybody, but I think we can all agree. No. I think that it's very cool what he's done. But did he make it cool? I don't know if Allan Holdsworth is the guy that made the headless guitar cool. It's cool.
As cool as it's gonna be.
Doing a lot of work in that sense.
So I remember I was at a clinic with him once, and somebody asked him some kind of like question about scales. And to paraphrase the question, although I remember it not being like, what kind of what scales do you use in this section? And his answer was just yes. Because he's just like, I use all the notes. No matter what the tonal center could be, I'm using all the notes.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing. Like, I think for a long time, like getting, there was a time when I listened to Holdsworth, and there was some aesthetic thing I got of just like the aesthetic and the actually just like technical ability that really wowed me. And I'd watch these videos, and he's playing, crazy looking guitars and stuff, and just like, he's very calm demeanor on stage and just like shredding this stuff. Like that's it. I was sort of fascinated with that, but I sort of thought that there was like, not that there isn't, but there's this harmonic thing going on that I was like, wow, that's so deep. And now I don't want to say that I understand his harmonic thing, but it's kind of like, oh, he's just using everything. It's not like, does that make sense? Like he's not chasing some specific harmonic mission. It's not some like tonal thing that I don't get how these chords go together. It's like, no, these are like Allan's brain is putting these chords together, and they're just nuts.
So if we had to point out a couple hallmarks of his style, we talked about the tone. It's a very processed, modern sounding. It seems like he was really kind of going for the least attack possible at times.
Yeah, there are times where his tone, like especially the 80s and later, where his tone, it's like, it's a thing that I don't particularly like, to be honest, but from him, I'm into it. But generally, like it's, instead of like, because he's so legato, instead of this picky thing, it's like, meow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, meow. It's like a little meow. And I think, when I hear that, it's like, when I hear other people do that, especially, like that's a Holdsworthy kind of thing. Yeah.
So that's one. I think another one is his chord voicings. As I gave you a quick little pop quiz, before we started recording,
tell the listeners about that.
So I found a little treasure trove of some Holdsworth transcriptions, and I just quizzed Nick, and I just said, "Here, I want you to fret I'm going to name out fret numbers from low to high, and I want you to put fingers on frets. And by golly, I think you played most of them, but it was not without strife.
There was definitely one I could not play.
Could not play.
I felt like I needed a headless guitar. I felt like I needed something ergonomic to get, positioned the right way, because it was a double bar on one fret. You had to get a double bar on the 5th and 6th strings, and then use every other finger. And I couldn't get it. It was not that bar. It was like in the middle of the chord. It wasn't with my index finger. It was like using my ring finger or my second finger to do a bar on the 5th and 6th strings, and then use all the other fingers. It's like, yeah, I just can't do this, actually.
And what we discovered was that he wasn't always going for the most efficient way to play chord voicing.
For chord voicing, no, but it feels like he was for scales, right? Like,
well,
that's
we're gonna get to that in a second. That's the next
Okay.
on the list. But for chords, he was,
because that's
more
not the first
interested-
time that his fingerings have eluded me.
no,
Or I've
he
tried something he's played and be like, yeah, I can't get there.
Yeah, he was more interested in maybe the timbre of playing certain notes on certain strings than he was, well, I can play this same exact chord voicing on this set of strings much easier.
Yeah. One of the chords you showed me, it was like I got there and it was an odd voicing and I could get there, but it was a stretchy kind of thing. I'm like, why don't you just play like this?
Yeah.
But it's changing which strings the notes are on, and like timbrally, it does sound different. All the notes are the same, but like that's why he doesn't play it like that, because he's hearing something about like, voicing this E on the E string or something.
And also, I think it could also have to do with where he's coming from and where he's going to. He might want some middle voices to move.
Yeah.
And it is easier to have those middle voices move, or high voice or whatever, in that fingering than what we would consider something that's much easier.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think the third point is his ungodly legato technique.
Oh man,
and
I know.
Being able to
super horizontal legato stuff.
Yes, very horizontal. Like you hear a lot of people talk about learning scales on one string.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is like the very, very first step to getting even a little bit of Holdsworth thing into your own playing, is start learning scales on one string rather than in positions.
Yeah. Or even something at one point I got from watching him and some voicing stuff is, like 4-note per string stuff. 4-note per string scale voicings. And that stuff, again, it's got to be you got to have the right guitar and the right setup. Like some stuff I can burn through that, or I have been able to burn through that. I don't know if I could at this moment. Depending on what guitar I'm playing. On my Jazzmaster, no, I can't. The scale is a little bit longer, and it's just not set up to like rip across like that. But like I have my Strat set up real low, some 10s instead of 11s, and like I could sort of get there. And like you could play that on the wrong guitar and just say, yeah, I can't do this. And it is very setup dependent. Speaking of that, though, have you ever played one of the Carvin Holdsworth signatures?
I've probably picked one up at one time or another. I remember being surprisingly heavy. Yeah.
They're not like, you don't pick it up, or my memory is not like picking it up and going like, wow, this is the easiest guitar to play. It's an odd guitar to play. But I can see how he can do his thing on it. Like I see how that's the guitar for him.
That to me is a perfect example of he designed the guitar to do what he wanted it to do. Like the guitar is designed to play that type of music in his way by him. Really, it wasn't hey, I'm going to make this guitar that has some features that I really like, but I want it to appeal to as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is part of like that, and the Steinbergers that he used. Like they're all part of his discovery of his thing. That like that's why going to the 70s, it's so odd. Like there's so few artists who are so consistent. Like his sound in the 70s, and I really like the distorted rock thing because it's a lot more aggressive. But there's a lot of material there, but you get to the 80s, and when he found his thing, like that, the gear allowed him to do his thing in a way that he just kind of, not to say he didn't evolve, because he certainly did evolve, but from then on, it's like he sounded like Allan Holdsworth, and in a way that, like, you can still recognize what he sounds like maybe from the 70s and say, okay, that sounds like Allan Holdsworth playing with a really dirty tone, but there's that caveat of playing with a dirty tone. It's from when he found his sound on, he just stayed in there, and the changes were a lot more subtle after that. And it's sort of like, in a way, I don't hear as many differentiations from album to album, like, and I don't remember the tunes that well, and I don't remember, like, you could play this record or this record or this record, and I wouldn't necessarily know which one it is. I'm not encyclopedic enough to do that, but also just like, it's so consistent. You could take 3 records 15 years apart, and his sound is so consistent that I might instantly identify that it's Allan Holdsworth in 5 notes or something, but after that, not be able to tell you the difference between any of them.
Yes. So let's now move to point people to some highlights in his discography.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's each just kind of look over here and pick maybe 3 areas to look at. You start. Give me one album that you think would be good for somebody to, maybe who's just starting with Holdsworth.
Somebody who's just starting with Holdsworth wants to know what Allan Holdsworth sounds like. I'm gonna pick a 70s record. It's just because I think it's easier to grab onto. New Tony Williams Lifetime, Believe It.
Okay, yes, that is a great album.
He sounds like Allan Holdsworth harmonically.
Yeah, not so much in tone yet.
Wise,
that's not
tone,
there yet.
No, the tune Red Alert, like, you
Burning.
start with Red Alert, but there's the whole album is so ripping. But like, listening to it this morning, Fred, Protocosmos, Red Alert, those are tracks 2, 3, 4. Those in a row.
He played those throughout his career too.
He
kept playing those tunes his whole life.
Like, those tunes have more notes than most albums. Yeah. Each one of those has more notes than many albums. Like, I think that's just such a great record. And I love his sound on there. It points to where he's going. Like, it's not just Bundles is before that, and Bundles is more just like dirty rock tone, whereas this points towards where he's going, but it's dirty rock tone. All right, how about you?
I would say if somebody's really just wanting to start, the album I would point them to would be the one I told you about today called None Too Soon, because that one, in his approach, is completely fully formed. And this was recorded in the mid-90s. Recorded in 94, released in 96, but it has tunes that are familiar to most people. Countdown, Nuages, How Deep is the Ocean, Norwegian Wood, Very Early, Inner Urge. So this is like his straight ahead jazz record, so to speak, although he throws an original in there and a Beatles tune. Kurt Covington on drums, Gordon Beck on piano, and Gary Willis on bass. And even the tunes I kind of know are almost in a way unrecognizable outside of maybe the Beatles tune.
They're definitely arranged in a Holdsworthian manner.
So this album to me is like, a lot of people say Holdsworth is kind of like the Coltrane of guitar, which I think this album probably demonstrates as well as anything, because it's just this sheet of notes coming at you, these sheets of sound coming, and he is on fire, especially that Countdown tune by John Coltrane.
The one thing I'll say about that record, I did not know that record before you pointed me to that one, and I stand by everything you said, but I think that somebody who's coming from a rock angle might be a little bit scared off by it if you're not into the jazz. Like, that's a jazz record, right? Like,
yeah, but it still has that fusion thing.
Oh,
like,
sure.
It has that energy to it. I mean, and that's where I think brings in the rock players, is the energy of it. You know, they might just be in awe of just all the little harmonic twists and turns it takes, but the energy of that record is still there, even though it's swinging.
I would also point people towards 1983's Road Games, which is an EP. According to Allan, they didn't finish that one. It's produced by Ted Templeman.
Yeah.
The story, my understanding is that Eddie Van Halen, who was a big Holdsworth fan, got Allan a major label contract. Ted Templeman, who produced Van Halen, is gonna, among also the Doobie Brothers, to make that yacht rock connection. Ted Templeman produced it, but Allan says he wasn't happy with it, that they didn't finish recording it. He didn't have control over it. And that was his experience. I totally get it. Whatever happened in the studio, listening to it, to me, it sounds very identifiable as an Allan Holdsworth record. It doesn't sound like there are vocals on there. So there's that, but that's not the only record of his with vocals. Jack
Bruce sings on the record.
So it's like, that's the only thing that I hear where he said that it was like they were trying to make it more commercial. That Ted Templeman was trying to take Allan and make him more commercial. I don't know. I guess more commercial than other things that Allan Holdsworth did, but it's pretty esoteric music. I don't think that was ever going to get pop radio play. No. It wasn't that commercial. It's not Van Halen. But I really like that record. I think that might actually be the first place I would say if somebody's like, what's Allan Holdsworth sound like? It might scare them away. It might not. Like, go to Road Games.
There we go. All right. Another one I would point to is Blues for Tony, 2009. It's a live double record, which was kind of dedicated to Tony Williams. He plays Fred. He plays Red Alert. He plays Protocosmos on there. And it's full on modern day, balls to the wall. I mean, is Allan Holdsworth like the quintessential fusion guitarist? I mean, who else has really combined jazz and rock, let's say?
Yeah, I would say
a level. It's like, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but it's like, for me, it's the quintessential. When I think of fusion, there's a bunch of little sub-genres around that, but like capital F fusion to me is prime Allan Holdsworth.
Like McLaughlin certainly made some fusion records, but I don't think of him. I don't describe him to people. I wouldn't describe him to somebody as a fusion guitar player. Even though Mahavishnu is definitely fusion, but to me, Mahavishnu, I mean, that's for that episode. It's more prog than.
Yeah.
And 70s fusion is different than what we're thinking. Like Allan Holdsworth is, I would say probably is the quintessential.
Especially into fusion. His 80s, Holdsworth 80s era and beyond.
Yeah.
Like capital F fusion.
Yeah, because part of fusion is being really nerdy, and it's really nerdy.
It's super nerdy. Super nerdy. All right, give me one more record.
One more?
One more.
I've been dancing around one because I thought you were going to pick it, but I guess all bets are off at this point.
Oh yeah.
Metal Fatigue.
I don't like Metal Fatigue.
Oh, you don't like Metal Fatigue?
I don't like
Metal Fatigue. I
was
thinking that this was the one. Okay, well, I didn't need to. That.
I mean, that's Metal not Fatigue. My favorite. That's not one I go back to very often.
Is it because of heavy metal fatigue?
I mean,
if you can get with that, you like Allan Holdsworth. So there's,
that's true.
The singing on Metal Fatigue is the hook of the song is heavy metal fatigue, and it's super cheesy. Like, but in a way, it was like, for me, it was kind of my hook in that. Like, here's this dude like shredding these insane solos and playing these like esoteric chords, and then somebody had the idea to make it vocal music, and like the lyrics are weird, the singing is not particularly awesome. I was sort of fascinated by this combo, and I got obsessed with that album. It's super 80s. Again, going back to Road Games, like I don't know how you could be unhappy with Road Games and like Metal Fatigue. Like they seem so esoterically 80s and weird. But a lot of angular playing, a lot of like awesome 80s tone, great legato lines. and songs that'll, give you a little bit of a chuckle.
All right, my last one. I sent you a link to this. Did you listen to it? The YouTube link, because it's not on streaming.
Oh, yeah, I did. I didn't last long, to be honest.
Talk about
it's a little much for me.
Minute. We talk about notes per minute.
Yeah.
We're talking about Truth in Shredding with Frank Gambale. And has there ever been a more apt title to a shred record? So it's really under the Mark Varney project, the guy behind Shrapnel Records. But this Truth in Shredding, look, again, you have a couple Brecker tunes, Chick Corea, Wayne Shorter tune, a couple originals, Shorter's Anna Maria. And it's again capital F fusion, recorded in released in 1990. And it is just so many notes.
It's a lot.
So many notes. And it's kind of hard to find. It is on YouTube. Not on streaming from what I can.
A lot of notes, not
find.
A lot of headstocks.
Yeah, right. Well,
actually, I'm not sure. He might have been.
Gambale's good for a headstock or two.
Oh, he didn't do a no headstock thing?
He might have. I don't know.
I forget. And Allan wasn't exclusively a no headstock guy. I mean, his Carvin has a headstock, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was the first in a series of records. Slight digression here. Mark Varney had a couple of these two of these project records. There was this one with Gambale and Holdsworth. The second one was called Centrifugal Funk with Gambale, Brett Garceed, Sean Lane, Mike O'Neill, and TJ Helmerich, which talk about imagine the warm-up room for that gig.
The horror.
There's going to be a lot of notes thrown around there. But they also stick to they play Actual Proof and So What and Elegant People by Wayne Shorter and then some original stuff. But that to me is prime Holdsworth.
So
prime.
we've stayed away from I feel like we need an honorable mention in here. We stayed away from the Synthaxe stuff, but we should talk about that for a moment because that is kind of an interesting peculiarity about Holdsworth is that he played the Synthaxe. I think the first album he played that on was I don't know if this is a real word or not.
Atavatron,
Atavatron, whatever. Awesome.
Very
cover.
Cool
Amazing
Star
cover.
Trek inspired cover art.
Yeah. If you don't know what the Synthaxe is, it is designed. It's a synthesizer.
Yep, we'll put a picture of it up right here.
Yeah, it's synthesizer designed to be played like a guitar. Holdsworth got really into it and stayed into it, I think, pretty much for the rest of his life. They were ungodly expensive when they came out, is my understanding.
$13,000.
Which, yeah, put that in 1985, 6, whenever he bought his money. That's a lot of money.
And there's fewer than 100 in the world.
Yeah. I would love to play one sometime and see what it feels like to actually hold it. Videos of him playing it are very cool. It looks so odd.
Yeah. It's basically a MIDI controller. Like you need, keyboard players are all over this now. Guitar players probably a little bit less so, but it's just a thing that sends out and there's no sounds in it. Like all your sound processing has to happen outside of the instrument.
So why doesn't that exist? Like Guitar MIDI controllers exist, but I want to see a MIDI controller that is built like a Synthaxe. I want to be able to buy a Synthaxe. You should, in theory, be able to get a Synthaxe now for a couple $100, but really not much money.
Well, they do have
MIDI.
I think with how much better the Roland synths specifically have gotten, that you don't really necessarily need a MIDI pickup to get good synth sounds.
True.
But if you had a MIDI pickup on a guitar, I remember not too long ago, Fender and Roland put out a Strat with a built-in MIDI pickup in it. And 13 pin. That kind of stuff now, it's much easier to do that than it is to create something as probably unwieldy as a Synthaxe, just for the Holdsworth nostalgia nerds like yourself, Nick.
But I do think that there's something about the actual, like, I keep putting my hands like that, like it doesn't hold, you don't hold it quite like a guitar. I think it would be cool, if only for nerds and nostalgia, it would be kind of cool to have an actual a controller that actually is set up like a Synthaxe. Because why not? Like, why enough people should buy that. Somebody make that. Somebody make that. I want one. What do you say we take a
call.
Not a break, but let's take a call. We got a couple calls here. Some folks, some guitar players want to chime in about Allan Holdsworth's playing. Here we go.
Hi, this is Andy Pitcher.
Friend of the pod.
I just wanted to talk a bit about Allan Holdsworth. I find there are few guitarists who are so singular that are so themselves, that so instantly sound like themselves, that are so difficult for others to get close to that sound without having any tricks to like really imitate it. There's folks who are kind of on another level speed wise, sure, like Buckethead or someone, but like, if you rock the kill switch a little, you can get someone to go, oh, cool. Yeah, Bucket, you're doing like the Buckethead thing. But
Fair.
Allan, front to back, be it, phrasing or sound, like his tone and timbre, it's just difficult. It's really kind of unattainable. Like he has those incredible swell sounds, and like I bought a Magic Stomp, and you quickly realize that the Magic Stomp is only doing a little part of it. It's also part of the way he plays, and part of the way he uses the volume knob, and part of the way he builds his signal chain. Everything he does is multi-step, and as far back as you can go, he more or less sounded like him. For someone to just come out thinking and playing this way is terrifying, and really something worth celebrating. I actually just last night was listening to the IOU Live in Japan 1984 record, and the solo on Where's One is just like baffling, genuinely confusing. That he's sounding like this in the mid 80s, and he really does get close to these saxophone like sounds and moments. But he also, like, there's no one saxophone player that I would say sounds like Holdsworth if you were to just fully put them one to one. And yeah, singular. I think about him a lot. Sometimes I think I want to just like throw out everything and become like a disciple and see if I could like work the rest of my life to get close to doing that, which would be stupid because I wouldn't be able to do it. Anyway, Allan forever.
Yeah, I think Andy's description of him being singular is one of the most apt descriptions because, I mean, you can hear his influence on a lot of guitar players, but nobody has even come close to doing what he does as well as he does, and probably for good reason, but still, like when you think about all the other great iconic players that changed guitar playing, there was always kind of a batch of kind of copycats, you could say, that got really close. And I don't think anybody has gotten really close.
No.
To Holdsworth. Who
would you say is the biggest Holdsworth advocate?
Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, same.
I mean,
that's the.
It seemed like Eddie's two favorite guitar players, the only ones he ever talked about were Clapton and Holdsworth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such an interesting combination, Clapton and Holdsworth. I should say, so anybody who's been keeping up with the 100 Guitars podcast knows Andy from being the guest on our My Bloody Valentine episode. Andy knows a lot about gear. He's very tuned into the gear world. And, if he were a guest on this podcast, we'd be able to ask him maybe 2 months ago, something like, I don't know, a couple months ago, he posted a picture of himself actually playing a Synthaxe.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about this. We need to get with Andy and talk about what it's like to actually hold a Synthaxe. Not many people can claim that, but I've seen images of him playing one. So I'm very curious.
All right. Last little thing I wanted to talk about is something I sent you right before this is his unique, and I think when we post this episode, we'll post a picture of this chart.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen a chart like this ever before.
I just saw this for the first time, 20 minutes before we started.
So let's see if we can just take a couple minutes here, maybe 3-4 minutes, and see if we can
let me pull that
dissect what the flip is going on here. So this is a chart for a tune called Tokyo Dream. There's a bunch of letters and symbols on there. The only really recognizable symbols, I think, is a very interesting flat symbol, which is not it looks like a flat symbol, but it's not a typical like font flat symbol. Right?
You don't think that's just a weird font? I guess you can't take
it. Could be. That's what I'm saying.
Here.
It's like it's not how we would typically see a flat symbol, although it's recognizable as a flat symbol. And a sharp symbol. And then you have a lot of X's. And then you have X's with circles in them. So, and then there's like a line about a third of the way down.
There's spectacles.
Here, I think that could be like an infinity symbol.
D infinity, not D spectacles.
So here's what I'm and this is purely speculation on my part. Nick. Those top 4 chords, we're gonna play that section twice. X, 2, right up there, right?
Which is odd to write as Roman numeral because that sort of implies something else,
some kind of chordal function or whatever.
Sure, I think you're right. I think that means twice. I think that the X. So I think X might mean triad.
No, I was thinking he puts an X there just as like a general tonal center. And that you're only playing each one. So it's like, we're going to hang out in B flat for a little bit, hang out A for a little bit, F for a little bit, E for a little bit, then go back around. And maybe X means some kind of, hey, we're going to do 12 measures of B, 12 measures of A, whatever. I don't know, 4 measures. I could see it more meaning some kind of rhythmic value than harmonic value. So that seems to be like section 1. Section 2, similar thing. But we have these what look like eyeglasses, but without the stems, right? And then it's interesting how these are stacked: D, B, A flat, F.
And I kind of wonder. Okay, so to me, that feels like maybe that you play that section 4 times, and it's C whatever, D whatever, G whatever, C whatever, F sharp over E thing. The next time you sub the second chord with a B, and the third time is A flat, fourth time is F. That would be my guess if we're decoding this.
Yes. Okay. So that's next section, right? What I think, I don't know if I don't know if that's one section or if that's 2 sections, because it looks like you have A over B, whatever. Or do you think it's A over B, then B flat, then G, then A over B, C, then E flat?
I think that.
You think that's more like it?
Yeah, and so you get A over B.
Then you go to B flat.
But it's not... and
that's a different symbol next to the
A
B
doesn't
flat.
have an X next to it. So it's like in the second system, you have the F sharp X over E. The E doesn't have the X next to it. And so there I'm like, okay, that's a bass note. On the bottom line, what's that? The high voice? Like, is it the B?
Maybe
X
it's an
thing?
A triad over a B, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe instead of a slash chord, it's more like a polychord.
And then it's a B flat, whatever.
Now that's a different symbol.
Yeah, that's a new
It's
symbol.
like an upside down ribbon, is what it looks like.
Yeah. And then a G minor 6, whatever.
With an X with a circle around it, like it's open. G minor 6. And then you have like a C Lydian and an E flat Lydian.
There is a 27-minute video on how to understand these chord symbols. We don't need to get into that.
But this is a fun game.
Yeah,
like you imagine rolling into a rehearsal and you're handed this and you're like, okay.
Even better, can you imagine rolling into rehearsal and handing somebody this?
Here's the thing. It probably makes complete sense to Allan.
It probably makes complete sense to whoever's in his band too.
Yeah.
You know, they're studying his system. It could be a really like effective shorthand for writing his stuff, because honestly, whatever is going on here, I'll tell you that I don't want to work. I would rather be taught the system up front and be given this, because this is super clear and I can memorize this. I can look at this and bam. And, you know, a couple times through, okay, I see what's on the page. I can refer back to that. What I can't do is get, you know, these chord voicings to take up 6 strings and sight read those things.
No.
Like that would be too much for me. I know some people, you're good at reading chords. We've looked at stuff before, and you can spot chords a little bit quicker than I can. Weird chord voicings, I don't really like seeing those transcribed. Like after 3 notes, I mostly just want to see like a chord chart on top of it, or I'm going to write my own shorthand in. So like if this is just Allan's quick way of getting that shorthand, like I kind of prefer it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in that video. Make sure to send me a link to that video.
Yeah.
So I can check it out. But I'm very interested. I feel like we should almost pause here, watch the video, and then come back and laugh at ourselves for how flippin' wrong we were. But I don't think we need to watch the video to know how wrong we probably are.
No, I'm sure we're very wrong.
I'm sure. I'd be interested if we got one thing right. I would be surprised.
We're doing this just for the entertainment of the like 8 people who are going to watch this who know already how Allan Holdsworth chords work.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's like very few people who know this stuff already.
Right.
We're in the nerdiest of nerdy guitar nerds,
and that's
stuff,
where Allan lives.
Yeah,
that's where Allan lives.
So I'm okay reading. I'm okay going through this and be like, I don't know what this is, to entertain those handful of people. That's our core base.
We have one more call to wrap this up with.
We do have one more call to wrap this up with.
Hey, this is Luke Polifnik in Chicago, Illinois, and reflecting on Allan Holdsworth. You know, everybody likes to talk about like his harmonic concept and, you know, how incredible his like legato stuff is. That's all great. No doubt. But the thing that stands out the most to me is actually his like rhythmic concept and the way that he shifts gears in and out of like odd note groupings, playing across the bar line, the way that he interacts with the drums. You know, he phrased a lot like a saxophone player, which is really cool. And I think is something that more than any of the intervallic or more like kind of, you know, shredding harmonic stuff, it's like his rhythmic ideas and the way he phrased that is the stuff that sticks with me the most.
Awesome. Thank you. Luke is an awesome guitar player. Luke is a total badass. Thank you for calling in, Luke. Yeah, the saxophone thing I feel like that's like the best way to like sort of encapsulate the type of sound he's going for and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad Luke mentioned that about the rhythm, because his rhythm it's also a rhythmic thing that sounds saxophony, like the type of expression he uses and the type of like, yeah, I don't know. It's almost like there's breath control of like a saxophone or something, right? Yeah. Like, even though there's a gazillion notes. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that for sure. You know what that sound means, Jason? So we're talking current listening. I will tell you that my discovery of the week, this came out earlier in 2024, but I was not aware of it until the past week. Live Forever Volume 3, Wayne Horvitz and Bill Frisell duo.
Gosh, I was hoping you were talking about like an Oasis B-side.
Sorry, bud. This is better. This is definitely more my speed than Oasis would be. Wayne Horvitz, incredible player of various keyboard instruments. He's doing these live recording archival series on his Bandcamp page. This is him and Bill Frisell. They were like super close collaborators at the time. These were recorded in Frankfurt and at the Knitting Factory in New York, 1989 and 1990. This sounds very much like it was recorded in 1990, and I mean that for me, the best way possible. I love hearing just the two of them together. Great 80s sounds. The second track, Look Out for Hope, which is a Frisell classic tune, and that's Desolation theme. It's like one of his hits. It's like they play it over, I don't know if they're using a drum machine live or they're playing over a track. There's like these really sick programmed 80s drums. They sound like Simmons pads or something. That the two of them are playing over. There's a couple tracks like that on here. Some really cool tunes from both of these guys. One Bright Day is from the Horvitz album that Frisell is not on, and it's a real standout track here. All right, I might be wrong. One Bright Day is a standout track from one of Horvitz's records that I really enjoy. And there's a few of these, and then they do Pipsqueak / Goodbye, which is a Frisell tune. I don't know if those are lumped. I forget if they're lumped together as one tune or two tunes, but I've heard it like that before. They do the jazz standard Days of Wine and Roses. But yeah, just the two of them. Lots of different keyboard sounds. Lots of cool 80s Frisell style sounds. I really enjoy it.
All right. So last week, I believe I hit the no guitar pick.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You sure did.
If my math is correct. So I got to have something with guitar this week. And I'm not necessarily recommending this album, but maybe this era of music is that I've been listening a lot to the Jersey Boys Broadway soundtrack, learning all the guitar parts for those songs.
Come on over. Let's get some hoagies, buddy.
Let's go.
Come for a visit, do some field research.
And but it really was interesting to me how when I go back and listen to because a lot of it's all Frankie Valli in the fourth, like that era of pop music. Yeah. And
love that.
The guitar parts, because the guitar parts in the Broadway show aren't necessarily note for note recreations of what's on the record, but it did force me to go back and listen to the record and hear how those parts were kind of layered and all that. And that was really interesting to me. So I ended up going down like a rabbit hole of listening to like Frankie Valli tunes, not seeing any of his modern day stuff, wink wink nudge nudge, where they wheel him out there, stick a mic in his hand and say T's and P's, Frankie. But yeah, I would say there's some underrated guitar parts, and nothing that's like too technically demanding, of course.
No, it's just vibey stuff. Yeah,
it's all vibey, cool stuff. Lots of like wah effects and flanger effects and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's what I've been listening to lately.
That sounds like a fun one to play.
I'm hoping so. I've had friends do it. I'm taking 2 guitar books and putting them together, so that's like a whole arranging thing.
You get paid double?
Not double, but more. Yes. So that's a definite skill. And so I usually do I'll scan all the music, put it all together between the 2 guitar parts, and then I go through and listen to it and annotate it all on my iPad before I even pick up a guitar to learn how to play the stuff.
Nice.
So it's a definite skill.
Fun.
If you want to be a working guitar player, that's a definite skill to bone up on.
Maybe more so than learning how to read Allan Holdsworth chord charts. Might be a more important skill.
The next time I'm going into a pit band gig, I'm writing all the tunes out like Allan.
Might be a good shorthand. We don't know.
Hey, we're B flat X, y'all. Follow me for the changes.
This is D spectacles.
D spectacles, and I'm going to put a circle around this X. Don't ask me why. Nobody knows. All right. So thanks again to Voodoo Lab for sponsoring today's episode. Head on over to voodoolab.com and check out all their pedals, their power supplies, and everything else they have going on. And I think we did it, Nick.
Yeah, don't forget you can get at us. Send us an email to 100guitarists@premierguitar.com. And the voicemail line and text line is 319-423-9734. We love to hear from you, and also give us a rate, a review, subscribe, all that stuff, depending on where you're checking out the 100 Guitarist podcast. All right. Well, thanks
see
for
y'all next
listening, and
week.
we'll see you next week.